Well, good morning and welcome to Ladner Baptist Church. If you're new, joining us online, new to the church, my name's Jeff Scott. I'm the assistant pastor here. As a church, we've been looking for a new lead pastor. For almost about a year now, we've been on the search for a lead pastor. And in this time, it's been an honor and a privilege of mine to be preaching and teaching with a team of people, a preaching team. Before COVID hit, we kind of had a rotation going, and then COVID messed that up. So we're getting into a rhythm again of how we're doing church online with this team of people. The preaching team, if you don't know the background, was established a long time ago, and so it's a group of people. Few have come and gone just because lives have changed, but it's been a privilege working with them. In this time, we've gone through a few different series. One of the series that we started with was called It's Not Over. Last summer, we called It's Not Over, where we looked at heroes of the faith, unassuming, normal, everyday people with ordinary lives that ended up living extraordinarily huge outcomes for their life. We looked at somebody like Rahab the prostitute, a hero of the faith. And that's something that gives me hope for my life. We looked at something, we did a series called The Plan. What's God's plan in all of this? Who is God? We looked at God from Isaiah, in Isaiah where it says, He's holy, 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 and understanding the holiness of God, and then the church, the building of the church, and who is the church? What is God's plan in and through the church? After that, we did a series called Just Getting Started, where we went through the book of Philippians, and we looked at this concept and this idea of rejoicing in all different circumstances. Then we did Hidden Christmas, different angles from Christmas. We started a mini-series called Be the Church, once COVID hit. And before that, we were in the book of Ephesians, a two-part look at the book of Ephesians, death to life, a lot of theology and doctrine there, and then set apart how to live our lives in light of who we are in our identity. And today, we're starting a new series online that I hope gives you hope and gives you joy and gives you peace, even in the midst of any sort of trials or challenges or worries that you may have. This is a series through the books of 1st and 2nd Peter. The new normal. We're calling it the new normal. Today's sermon I've called a new perspective. A new perspective. I think that some of us need a new perspective on the circumstances or situations that we're in. I do. I needed it all week. I need it today. I'm going to need it tomorrow. I'm going to need it for the rest of my life. I need a fresh perspective on my situation, knowing who I am and whose I am. 1 Peter chapter 1. 1 Peter chapter 1. You can follow along with me. I'll be reading from the ESV. 1 Peter chapter 1, starting in verse 1, and we'll read to verse 9. It says this: Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to those who are elect exiles of the dispersion of Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, Bithynia, according to the foreknowledge of God the Father, in the sanctification of the Spirit, for obedience to Jesus Christ, and for sprinkling with his blood. May grace and peace be multiplied to you. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to his great mercy, he has caused us to be born again to a living hope. We don't have a dead hope. We don't have a stagnant hope. We have a living hope. A living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you, who by God's power are being guarded through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you rejoice, though for now, for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes, though it's tested by fire, may be found to result in the praise and the glory and the honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Though you've not seen him, you love him. Though you do not now see him, you believe in him and rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory, obtaining the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. This is 1 Peter, and today's sermon is called A New Perspective. A New Perspective. And I'll give you the whole sermon right here, right now. Salvation brings hope. Salvation brings joy. Salvation brings a new perspective. The writer of this letter, Peter, the writer of this letter is Peter, and he knew this his whole life. He was a disciple of Jesus. He knew adversity. He knew the challenges. He knew what it felt like to be a failure. Peter, I think a lot of us can relate with Peter. He's a basic, everyday person. He was a fisherman. And many years before this letter, when Peter was a lot younger, he had a lot to learn. And he never stopped along the way. He never stopped learning and developing and growing and understanding what was going on, what was God doing in this world. Even though at times he was a little bit outspoken, even at times he may have put his foot in his mouth, and even at times when he messed up big time. A lot of us are just doing our thing, right? We're living our lives. We're going to work, we're coming home. And in this season, many of us are wondering, or at least I'm wondering at times, where's God? What's God doing? Where's God in all of this? What's he doing in this world? I was talking to somebody earlier this week on the phone about a situation in their life, real challenging situation that they were going through. And they said this, that it's hard to believe in God in this season in my life because of all the trials and challenges and issues and problems. It's really hard to believe that there is a God who loves me and that there is a God who's in control. I think many of us can relate. When adversity comes, I'm challenged in my faith. I'm challenged in understanding God's love. I'm challenged in doubting my calling, doubting my purpose, because my perspective of the situation is often focused on myself. Peter's a lot older now. He's rejected Jesus when Jesus was leading up to the cross. He was seated with the crowd. You'll remember that from our Easter sermon and Good Friday sermon. He was seated with the crowd when the situation got bad. And then after the resurrection of Jesus in the book of Acts, Peter goes from sitting with the crowd to standing with Christ and boldly proclaiming who he is. His trials, his problems, his challenges, they've refined his ability to write this letter to the churches and to you and me. Peter knows, he knows what these Christians in this time are going through, right? The church was under a lot of persecution. The ruler at the time in the area, his name was Nero, and it said that Nero burnt down the whole town because he wanted to build. And the Roman citizens were turning on Nero, so Nero makes up a story and says it was the Christians. And so now the persecution goes against the Christians because they'd already been a little bit problematic to their society, a little bit problematic. And so there's a lot of pressure building, a lot of persecution happening, a lot of challenges in their life, and this pressure starts to push against their faith. And so Peter writes this letter because he wants to remind them and remind you and me that our identity is found in God, not in culture, not in human relationship, not in education, not in vocation. Our identity is in God. And I say that because when he opens the letter, he writes to the people who are hurting, people who are persecuted, people who are oppressed, people who are facing myriads of trials, and he focuses on election, on who you are, on what your identity is. That's interesting to me. And it's interesting to me because I believe that it's God's eternal purpose for, in, and through us that's the only thing that will ultimately sustain us in hard times. Knowing who we are and whose we are as God's elect is the truth that the Spirit of God will repeatedly bring to your mind to encourage us in times of affliction, to strengthen our wills when we're tempted, and to sustain our hope when it feels like everything is falling apart. When it feels like everything is falling apart. God wants us to know that none of the hardships or disappointments that we face as exiles on this earth are a surprise to him. So we need to dwell in that truth. We need to exist in that truth. We need that to sink deeply in our souls, that God has chosen you, that the Spirit has set you apart for a unique and beloved possession, as a unique and beloved possession, and that our life is now designed for obedience to Jesus. This truth needs to be established in our hearts. Jump to verse 3. It says this: "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to his great mercy, he has caused us to be born again to a living hope." A living hope. Salvation brings hope during seasons of angst. Right? You'll remember this from our series in the book of Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 12 says this: "Remember at that time when you were separate from Christ, excluded from citizenship in Israel, and foreigners to the covenants of the promise, without hope and without God in this world." 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13 says this: "Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope." No hope. We don't have a dead, lifeless, futile hope. We have a living hope. We have a living hope that has the power to change how we live. And it's alive because its focus and object is real, it's unchanging, it's true, and it's rock solid through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Verse 4, "To an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you." It's through our faith that God keeps us secure. Verse 5, it says this: "Who by God's power are being guarded through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time." Salvation brings hope. Salvation brings hope because that hope is secure in our inheritance, which is imperishable and can't be stolen. See, the Christians at the time had a lot of reasons to think about the future hope. I got to think about the future hope. And in their present circumstances, they had a lot of reasons not to have any joy. A lot of reasons not to have any joy. I believe that salvation brings joy, even in the midst of everyday trials. Last week, we talked about putting on the whole armor of God, because this faith is a fight to the finish. Like, I'll tell you, right after that sermon, I could have used I got to make sure I got my armor of God on every day, every single day. I got to make sure it's working, right? You've been there too, because the enemy can attack you in very unique and different ways, right? At times, Satan, which means the adversary, the devil, which means slanderer, robs my joy. And he does it to you too. And this can be done through your own thoughts, my own thoughts that just go, I'm caught in a loop, my own thoughts, and they've just got me in a loop. They can be from your perspective of a situation that you're going through. God's not powerful enough. God's not going to get you through this. God's not got an inheritance for you. What you see now is what the final end is, right? Through my perspective of the situation that's going on in my circumstances, or even through other people, who speak lies into your life, who tell you you're not good enough, who call you away from what your calling and your purpose and your identity is into another thing. And at times, they may not even know that they're doing it. Peter knows this. because Peter has done this. He's older now. He knows what believers need to hear. And he knows what he's done in his past. And that's refined him to the wisdom that he's giving us here. Look at the life of Peter. Rewind a few years to Matthew chapter 16. Matthew chapter 16, verse 21. This is where Jesus foretells his death and resurrection. Matthew chapter 16, verse 21. Starting in verse 21, it says this. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed on the third day be raised. Verse 22. And Peter took him aside. He took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. Peter takes Jesus aside, picture that, and begins to rebuke him, saying this, far be it from you, Lord, that shall never happen to you. But Jesus turned and said to Peter, so Jesus says to Peter, he says this, get behind me, Satan. You're a hindrance to me, for you're not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. Peter was so focused on this world, on this way of life, on anything and anything that threatened that way of life, anything that went against that comfort, anything that went away from their thoughts of where things were supposed to be going had to go. Anything that threatens that had to go. And there's no doubt in my mind that Peter had this moment resonate in his memory for a long time to follow. But he's older now, and he understands the things of God. And he knows that although you may suffer, although you might be tempted to turn back from your faith, although you might be tempted to turn from your calling, because it's getting a little bit difficult, it's getting a little bit challenging, it's getting a little bit adverse out there. Although you might be wanting to give up because of your circumstances, he knows that even if there's suffering for a season, salvation brings joy. See, before this all happened, Peter would have told these early Christians just to give up, just to turn back. Don't stay in Rome. Avoid Rome. Give in to the cultural demands of the time because it's more comfortable that way. But now he's saying that even though there's problems and adversity and challenges, you've been called, you've got a purpose, you've got an ultimate destiny that brings hope, and in the midst of that, you can have joy. Why? Look at verse 6. Verse 6 of 1 Peter chapter 1. In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you've been grieved by various trials. Like I ask a lot of times, God, why would you allow this to happen? Why would you let this circumstance or this situation happen in my life? I've asked it many times. Like, why, God? Why is this happening to me? What's going on? What's your plan in this world? I didn't deserve this. This is too much for me to handle. This is too difficult. I've said that before. I've been there before. Every time my thoughts start and end with myself, and this might be where we're headed here. Every time my thoughts start and end with self, it either ends in scarcity or it ends in sorrow. Martin Lloyd-Jones says this, says our problem is that we spend too much time listening to ourselves. Our thoughts that play a loop over and over and over and over and over in our minds. We spend too much time listening to ourselves. And he says, and not enough time preaching to ourselves. I spend far too many hours thinking about myself, thinking about my problems, thinking about my situation. I was out for a run a few days ago, a couple weeks ago or whatever. And anybody who knows me knows that I hate running, so they're probably laughing right now because it's not my thing. But I went for a run. I run around the Winskill field, around the field, in behind, through the Frisbee golf area. And we should start a running club. Come on out, 5:30 every night during the weeknights. It'll be the LBC running club, and more like a fast walk club if you're running with me. But I got this text message, right? I run with my phone out, because I don't want it to fall or anything like that. And I run with my phone. I was listening to a song called Rattle. It's an awesome song. It's a new song that I'm really into right now. And I get this text message. I get this difficult, really challenging text message. And it's like, whew. I wanted to stop running anyway, but this was a good reason to stop. And it was really difficult to read. And so now my thoughts start rolling around my mind, and the object of my focus became about myself. And I found myself from running, I was out running, to now just sitting there on the bleachers in Winskill, staring at this text, staring at this message, thinking about myself, thinking about my abilities, thinking about my purposes. It all became about me. That became the song. That was the new loop. That was the new song in my mind. It went from Dead Bones Rise, this awesome song called Rattle that had me hyped up, to this me song. And I'm sitting there listening to my thoughts rather than preaching to myself. That's what the Psalms is all about, right? David in the Psalms, in great adversity, what does he do? He says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name." He starts preaching to himself. He's preaching to himself. Brene Brown, a great author, Brene Brown says this. I've heard her speak at some HR conferences and consultation, and she says this: the number one meditation of many people's hearts is not enough. Not enough. This is the scarcity part. And it cripples our joy. She says we apply it to time. She says we apply it to money. She says we apply it to our talent. And the thoughts play over and over and over in our minds. Not enough. Like, watch this. How much sleep did you get last night? Not enough. I can hear you through the camera. How much does your job pay? Not enough, right? Some people ask, well, what's a good salary? Is $50,000 a year a good salary? Well, it is until you make it, and then it's not enough. Not enough. I think this is the enemy's sermon in your mind. Not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not rich enough. I don't have God's favor on my life enough, right? Not enough, not enough, not enough. Peter knows this because he said this. He was standing right beside Jesus when they went to feed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And what does he say? What does he think? What does he believe? Not enough. Of course it wasn't enough, but he was focused on the supplies and on the situation and not the source standing right beside him. And when I start my day with myself and I end my day with myself and I'm in this loop and the thoughts of myself and the thoughts of my abilities and the thoughts of the stuff I have and the thoughts about me, then when I get a difficult text or anything like that, it's never enough and it's exhausting. Whether I'm in a season of self or in a season of sorrow, I need to start and end with the thoughts of heaven and know that my source is Jesus and he is more than enough, so that when my faith is tested and when my faith is challenged and my calling feels uncertain and I don't have enough and I'm caught in this loop and I don't have enough and my calling's uncertain and my faith is tested and my circumstances are difficult and I'm caught in this loop and I'm in this loop and I'm in this loop and I'm stuck in this loop. In Psalms David gets us into a new loop, right? The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament his handiwork. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. He says, my God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, right? My God is more than enough. And the tested genuineness of your faith, verse 7 of 1 Peter, more precious than gold that perishes, though it's tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Though you've not seen him, you love him. Though you don't see him now, you believe in him and rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory. This joy is inexpressible, a joy so profound, a joy that is greater than my circumstances. It's beyond mere words. It's all-consuming, overwhelming, speechless joy. This joy defies all human efforts at understanding or explanation. See, there's joy that is destroyed by trials, and then there's joy that's developed by trials. I want this joy, right? Not this generic joy when the weather's perfect and the wind's blowing through your hair and you're out on a motorcycle or the top's down or whatever. I want this kind of joy, right? Not a temporary joy when you're out chasing, a photo op with a selfie stick. I want this kind of joy, not this counterfeit kind of joy of a cropped photo that you post online so that you get some likes of some people that don't ultimately really matter so that you can project a life that's perfect. I want this joy. I want a deeper joy. I want a sustained joy. I want a significant joy. I want an inexpressible joy that is filled with glory. That kind of joy. That kind of joy, because it's been developed through the testing of faith and trials of many kinds. It's the tested as though by fire kind of faith. The world can't steal my joy because it didn't give it to me in the first place. And if the world didn't give it, the world can't take it away. This kind of joy, that your future is secured by the saving grace of God through the resurrection of Jesus. And that's the cause for your joy. God's promise is unshakable ground of assurance for our souls. So no matter the struggles, the setbacks, the disappointments, it will guard you and keep your faith alive. What is this tested by fire kind of faith? See, the goldsmith knows when the gold's been refined enough. Right? Initially, there's this dross or this sludge on it that needs to be skimmed away as the gold's getting refined. And the refiner knows when the gold is ready, when they see their image reflected in the gold. That's when they know it's pure. That's when they know it's pure. I have learned in seasons of prosperity, but the testing of my faith is the occasion in which I grow into greater conformity in the image of Jesus, choosing meekness, choosing kindness, choosing love, choosing gentleness. In verse 9, obtaining the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. That's what gives me hope. That's what gives me joy. And that's what gives me a new perspective on my temporary circumstance. Oh, the sorrow may last for the night, but joy comes in the morning.
Thanks for joining us for our online Sunday service. If you are able and willing to give, please go to ladnerbaptist.ca www.cc.ca/give. Please join us again next week. I wish we could be together in person. However, right now, we'll see you again online.